Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Investor Lab, the auditory epicenter for passionate people seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. And on today's show, we start to meet the humans of Dashdot. So we're taking a little bit of a step behind the scenes where we get to meet the humans that are behind Dashdot. And when Dashdot is the business that is behind the Investor Lab, and the reason we do the Investor Lab is because we want to have a platform to be able to share valuable insights, ideas, thinking paradigms that help to shape and grow you as an investor and help to deliver you to a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. The business that gives us the capability to do that is Dashdot, and that is where we help people on a one-to-one basis to help them to accelerate their property portfolios and to achieve that life that they want. If they need help, and if you need help too, awesome, reach out to us. But what we want to do now is we want to start to share. It's not just me and Gabby back here, right? We're not rolling this boat ourselves. There's a whole team of amazing, wonderful human individuals with amazing stories and amazing values. And so this is our first step in bringing the team forward so that you could meet them before you meet them. And on today's show, we had a chat with Nic Denshire, who he's been in the team for a little while now, and he's actually one of our managers and a property acquisition manager and a team leader. So we talk a little bit about that. We also talk about his story and his journey. Where did he come from? How did he get here? What's his property journey look like? What are some of the biggest mistakes or he's made along the way, or some truths that he can maybe share with other people? We go into all kinds of stuff and all kinds of territory. And I actually found it to be really valuable and entertaining, and it also got a little bit emotional. And I really liked that. It's great when an episode makes you feel something, and I think that this episode is going to do that for you. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share this time with you as well. So without any further ado, let's get stuck right into it. Enough waffle from me. Let's get into the show. And of course, make sure you like, rate, review, share, give this to a friend, family member, or loved one. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you reach out and let us know too. So that's enough from me. Let's get stuck right into it. I'll see you on the inside. Hey guys, welcome back to the Investor Lab. Joining me today is a guy named Nic Denshire. Now, Nic may be familiar to some of you people if you've had anything to do with our business behind the scenes, Dashdot, but this is the very first episode or a first installment of a series that we're going to be rolling out ongoingly called the Humans of Dashdot, where we take a look at the human stories behind the scenes and try and help people to understand, what goes on behind here, who we all are, and it's not just the team, but also our clients, etc. And I think this is really going to be an interesting exploration and an interesting discovery. And Nic, I'm excited to have you on the show. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to be here as well. We've had a few false starts of trying to do a podcast, so I'm excited we're actually sitting opposite each other in the chairs.
Yeah, totally. It's about time too. So, mate, I'd love to get into it. What I want to do in this episode is I really want to get a little bit into your backstory. Now, a lot of people will have no idea who you are. We have a lot of listeners to this show who will never have met you and won't know what you do, who you are, and all that kind of stuff. So why don't we start with, what do you do now? So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Dashdot, and then we'll take a little bit of a dig back into where it all started.
So my current role is as the property acquisition manager. So I kind of and the property team leader, property acquisition team leader. So I kind of look after the team that does the finding of the properties, the due diligence of for properties, and then ultimately once I've given it the tick of approval based on a client brief, and I present that to the client and then work through that whole process with the client. So that's my day-to-day role at the moment. Yeah,
awesome. And I mean, how long have you been doing this, and how did you get here? Like, what's the backstory? Because you haven't been in property for that long.
No, so my most recent formal training is as an engineer. So I was previously working as a flood engineer. On the side, I was doing property investing, and then I actually came to Dashdot as a client. And I had so much fun that I called up after and said, "Hey, is there any way I can get to work with you?" And it just happened there was a job going, and when that first started, I came obviously in with very, very green because I hadn't worked in real estate before, and through that, that work, I picked up some work with Dashdot, and then actually did my real estate license, and that's got me up to where I am now. So
yeah.
yeah, I've learned every little step of the way, I guess, under the tutelage of Goose and Gabby, up until this point.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome that I really love that story because, you were a client who has now become, one of the management team within the business and is helping to guide and shape this journey for our clients. So I think it's really awesome because you've got the client side experience as well. But let's take a little step back because whereabouts do you live at the moment?
At the moment, I'm in Nambucca, which is about half hour south of Coffs Harbour in New South Wales.
Yeah, and so you work fully remotely. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've actually requisitioned my kid's cubby house, which is about 3 meters by 3 meters, and turned it into the home office. So I put some new windows in, put an air conditioner in it when it was summer. Done a few things to tidy it up, but that was really the emergency response to COVID coming and having to work from home. And so that's where I am in Nambucca. We'll miss the rest of the question.
Yeah, whereabouts did you grow up? Have you always lived in that area, or where are you from originally?
Always in New South Wales, but prior to this, I was in Newcastle for about 10 years. And then I actually grew up until my teenagerhood on the Central Coast, so up behind Gosford in a small sort of country area called Colnura.
Yeah.
And then I was in Newcastle for a good probably 10 years, and then I've been up here, 15 years now. So I lived in Bellingen for a while in a township, and now I live on a little, what I call a farmlet, a little tiny, like a hobby farm, sort of 10 acres out in the hills behind Nambucca, actually.
Nice. Yeah, you've got the good kind of the lifestyle balance going on there, where you get to work remotely from your hobby farm and do all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty good gig.
It's so surreal, like to think I'm buying properties for people and with clients down in, the high rises of Sydney, and a property up in, North Queensland or Western Australia from my little cubby house in Coffs Harbour. It's an amazing thing to be able to do. It's awesome.
I know, it's phenomenal. It's just wild how much the world has evolved to give us the capability to do that kind of stuff, because a few years ago that would have been, probably unthinkable. And now it's now the fact that it's possible, I think it's awesome because it really is a testament to the fact that we actually all can live our best lives now, rather than just saying, I'm going to work now and then hopefully get to some destination in the future where I can get to live the lifestyle I want. It certainly seems as though you're putting yourself in a position to be able to have the best of both worlds, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I love the juxtaposition that like what's traditionally quite a sort of high, suit wearing professional type job that I can do from a little farm out in Coffs Harbour, and like the new world order seems to be a bit more about what you do as opposed to how you look or how you dress or that kind of thing. And I really love that, and to be judged on your performance as opposed to your how you look.
Yeah, for sure. Now you mentioned that you trained as an engineer and you were working as an engineer and all that kind of stuff. But what other career pathways have you had? Because I know that you did a stint in the army, didn't you?
Yeah, through uni I was in the Army Reserves, and then I did a very small amount of full-time service up out of Darwin on patrol boats, like patrolling for illegal fishing and so on off North Australia. So I did that. So I was in the army for probably 5 or 6 years in total, but most of that was reserves, that all doing weekends and a couple of weeks away at a time kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was through uni, and then I came out of uni and I went into kind of consulting work in subdivision type stuff, water design and subdivisions, because I'm quite into water. And then out of that went into local government, and then finally state government, and then hopped from there into real estate most recently, about probably almost 18 months ago now.
Yeah. And when did you first start having an interest in real estate?
It was probably, 6 or 7 years ago now. What changed 6 or 7 years ago was that my interest moved to investment as opposed to my principal place. So probably I've been looking at real estate for dreaming about, ideal properties for 20 years, but it's probably 10 years I've started actually looking at investment properties. And the catalyst for that was that I read an investment book, or to take another step back, my brother-in-law is works in finance, a financial advisor. And I was kind of observing him and his partner's journey and how they kind of budget and all that sort of stuff. And that got me into budgeting. And I pulled out a finance like an investment book, a finance book, because I was a bit worried we were getting left behind, to be honest. My partner and I were like, we're just kind of living day to day and then just enjoying life, and that's awesome. But I'm worried in 20 years we're going to look back and go, holy shit, why didn't we do something?
Yep.
So I read this book, and basically the catalyst for me was it said list all your net worth, essentially, all your assets, and then work out which ones are investments, i.e. income producing, and which ones are lifestyle, i.e. they allow you to live your life and therefore the enjoyment of your life. And I pretty much had everything in my lifestyle asset and I had nothing in investment. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
And that's when we bought our first investment property. So we actually had our principal place then, or like a part of it, obviously, with the bank owning a large proportion. And out of that, we pulled some money out of the principal place and bought a little house in Bellingen where we were living at the time. And that was the start of it, really.
That was the start of it. So the place you bought in Bellingen, did you buy that because you moved to Bellingen as well? So did you buy the place in Bellingen and then move into it, or did you buy it purely as an investment?
No, it was just as an investment. And we were looking specifically, like at that end, like to jump forward a bit, the Dashdot's brought together a lot of the concepts that were kind of on the periphery of my understanding that I'd come to myself. So it's kind of just crystallized them and put them in a nice framework. So to take that step back again, what I was looking for then, I understood that cash flow was very important for risk mitigation and ability to keep moving forward and that kind of thing. I didn't really understand how you can select different areas, and I only saw the properties outside my backyard, obviously. So I looked around in Bellingen. I was living in Bellingen, my principal place then. I was looking for a specific investment property, but I wanted it to be cash flow positive or neutral. So I was specifically looking for something that I could put a granny flat on, because the yields in Bellingen typically just aren't going to be cash flow positive. So I looked for something that could put a granny flat on, bought a 4-bed brick house, and we actually put a granny flat on it within about 2 months. And it was a removal house, like a second-hand house on the back of a truck. They backed in there, reassembled, and then I did all the landscaping around it and put stairs and bits and pieces to sort of make it livable. And that's how the granny flat came about.
Yeah, nice. And wasn't that right about the time that you became a dad, or isn't there some interesting story around that?
Yeah, so I'd actually kind of already had a fair bit of contact with financiers and trying to get finance, because we would, prior to that kind of epiphany about investment, we'd done a fair bit of renovation on our house, and we'd kind of tried to pull equity to build a nice big deck and bits and pieces like that, all lifestyle assets, by the way. And so I understood the finance game a little bit, and I realized that as soon as we had a baby, our serviceability was going to drop due to our living costs going up. And my wife at that time was pregnant with our second child. So we already had our first. She was 3, I think, or 2. And so she was pregnant, and she was about towards the end of it, she was actually in labor. And I was like rushing to get the retaining wall finished so that I could get the final inspection from council, so that I could get the occupation certificate so that I could refinance the loan prior to the baby popping out and getting on the books.
Whilst she's in labour, you're trying to do that.
I was, and she was literally calling me up and going, "Oh, baby, I think I can do another hour. Okay, just push through." And I had another young fella that was helping me on the retaining wall, so I was kind of back and forth a bit. But yeah, that was the last rush to the finish line on that. And we actually made it. We got the occupation certificate and refinanced, because how I did it, because I really didn't want to do construction loans because of all the kind of quantity surveys you need and all the overheads that happen with that. So I actually had a loan from my family, but the understanding was that we'd refinance that once the granny flat was finished and then pay them back. So transfer the loan back to the bank. So that was why that critical threshold was there, to get that money to pay back the family. And then, then hopefully it was all going to be cash flow positive from that point, which it was.
Nice. Do you have any regrets about that? Because that's obviously there's obviously a lot going on there.
I'm not sure I would say I have regrets about it. I think it's an important part of my journey. I think it impacts my wife a bit more than me, in terms of that, me not being there for that critical period so much. I was obviously there for the birth, like when we went into hospital and that sort of thing. But just in that pre-labor stage, I wasn't there. She was there with our 3-year-old, and she was helping her and that kind of thing. But what I like about it is the grit, I guess. And Amy and I talk about grit a lot, and wanting to display grit to our children, like, getting that, pushing through to get that last 10% of something done that often can just drag out. So that part of it, in terms of my journey, I find quite valuable. So I wouldn't say I regret it, no.
Yeah, awesome. Really good insights, particularly about the grit piece. And sometimes it's in those tough moments that you really need to really stand by what the values are, even when it can be really challenging. So okay, so you got the place in Bellingen with the granny flat. That worked out all right for you?
Yeah, it did. So when we bought it, I think it was getting 4.5% gross yield or something of that order. And after we did the granny, it bumped it up to 6.2%. So it was made it cash flow positive. I can't remember exactly how much by or whatever. But, it was a bit of a leap of faith, and we weren't sure if it was going to rent. We were fairly green to the whole game. Apart from that, having that fundamental understanding of wanting to preserve our loan serviceability and be cash flow positive for risk mitigation, because we didn't want to have, a negatively geared property hanging over our head, because we're fairly lifestyle focused. But yeah, it worked out pretty well in the end.
Yeah, awesome.
And I did refinance it. I got my money back from the granny flat, and then a little bit, not a whole lot, but I think it cost me about 80,000 to build, and I probably got about 100,000 back from the bank.
Interesting.
But the extra money would have been my actual labour putting into it, for sure. Like, if I'd paid someone to do the whole lot, it would have cost me probably 120 to do.
Yeah, so okay, got it.
Didn't really give me any uplift if I account for my labour that I did on the job.
Yep. No, that makes sense. So, I don't want to do a full, hyper analysis on your portfolio, but I'm interested, like, was it, at what point did you decide to work with Dashdot? Like, was that after that property, or did you get any other ones? Or tell me a little bit about that. And I'm also I'm going to back it up with another piece of the question. I'm also interested to know whether or not you think you would do granny flats again, knowing what you know now. So talk to me about those kind of aspects.
So I was ready to buy another property. It was probably 4 or 5 years later, probably a bit less, maybe 4 years. So we pulled money out of that property, equity out of that property, and we're rolling that forward into another property. Again, I was looking in my backyard because that's all I knew. And I was actually onto a property that was very similar, had about 5% gross yield. So it was almost cash flow neutral, like, depending on how you calculate it. And that was one of the conversations we had early on, Goose.
Depending on how you look at it.
I said to you, oh yeah, I've got this one. It's about cash flow neutral. And you asked me the parameters, and you said, oh, you think that's cash flow neutral? And I said, yeah, it's pretty close. And you said, okay. And I thought that was nice that you didn't kind of go, no, that's not cash flow neutral, mate. You kind of just said, well, if that's what you believe, then that's okay. But anyway, sometimes I was looking at this property in Nambucca, which is just up the road from where we were living at the time, and it was getting about 5% gross yield as well. Same thing, had quite a big backyard, had access for either a second house or a granny flat or something. And I was almost ready to pull the trigger on that. And I stumbled across a Dashdot ad wherever. And I thought, well, what's the harm in having following this little rabbit hole to see where it goes? And we had a discussion, and pretty much I explained to you that was where I was going to go, buy this house in Nambucca. I was getting 5%. And from our conversation, basically you said that we can do better than that. And I said, well, if you can do better than that, let's do it. Let's give it a crack. And where we landed, so then I became a client, and where we landed was that I bought a house basically off the shelf that was getting the same kind of parameters that I was going to get by manufacturing that yield by putting the secondary dwelling on or whatever. So I would have hopefully landed somewhere about 6.5 gross just in my backyard in Nambucca, not understanding about anything about capital growth or anything like that. But as it was, we bought some west of Brisbane, and we bought a house off the shelf that was getting about 7% gross, and all I had to do was sign all the paperwork and go through the whole purchasing process, and that was it. Yeah, and that was a big epiphany for me.
Yeah, and just to clarify, off the shelf, you mean, an established property in an established neighborhood, as opposed to something.
Yeah, that's what but I meant, the point is that I didn't have to do anything to it. I bought it as a complete existing unit, an existing house. A pre-existing house. And then that's when I've kind of realized that, if I'd done that first, I wouldn't have had that. like apart from speaking earlier about not having regrets, but if I'd done that the first time, then I wouldn't have had that, 3 months of like working every day on this granny flat for the first house. And that kind of just made me think, well, that's a much smarter way to move forward. There's lower risk. I don't have exposure for paying out money to tradies and doing having downtime for rent and all that sort of stuff. So basically, it converted me to shopping outside my area, which at the time I wouldn't have had the skill set to do. So Dashdot helped me in that respect, and it opened my eyes to it being possible to get cash flow positive properties that are pre-existing. You don't have to manufacture the cash flow by doing intensification of the site or anything like that.
Yeah, well, cash flow is easy, but it's the cash flow growth bit, which is the fun part, right? And I think you've done all right out of the properties you bought, because you're on to what, property number 3 now with Dashdot, I think is where you're up to.
It's number 3 with Dashdot, so my 4th. That's right. Yeah, and they've all kind of just rolled forward from that first property. So we haven't got an amazing savings rate, and we've got various projects on our little farm. We're sort of building a house and stuff, so that sucks a lot of our money. So pretty much we made that first jump for that first property, and the up to 4 now will be just rolling that equity forward each time. But just to take a quick step back, like at that time, I didn't really understand capital growth. I was just like, you just buy a house and it doubles every 10 years. That old chestnut. So I didn't even know what I didn't know at the time. And I just bought in areas that I like to live, obviously, because I like to live there. So everyone must like to live there. And that was what I thought was the main game.
Yeah, totally. And that's super common as well. I mean, like, I know when I started, when Gabby and I bought, the off the plan apartment and all that kind of stuff, we just thought, oh, property doubles every seven years, right? So it doesn't matter what you buy, you just buy a property and it doubles every 7 years. It's like that, is it? Yeah, cool. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that most people don't know what they don't know, and start believing all of these myths and mistruths. So I'm interested to know, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in your property journey so far through all of the stuff you've gone, or maybe what's one lesson that you can share with the listeners to help guide them?
I think the biggest thing for me, and this is a reflection through working with clients and stuff now, is that, and it's something I'm still trying to wrap the words around to make it clear to clients and to people generally, is that something, I don't know the exact statistics, but the average property investor buys 95 or 90% of them or something by one. You probably know the statistics. So
71% buy one property, and a further 19% will get to 2. But that means 90% of property investors never get past 2 properties.
Yeah. So the point being, if your intention, and my intention with property is to move towards a life of choice, basically, where I don't have to have the salary dictating the kind of work I put myself in, or the kind of work I do. And to get to that target, you need more than 2 properties. You probably, for me, I probably need of the order of, somewhere between 5 and 10 properties. So the default thinking, the average investor, the default thinking is going to get you to 1 or 2 properties. If you want to get past that, then you need to have a paradigm shift in the way that you understand real estate. So the point being that your default thinking is not going to get you there. You need to work some edges and push some boundaries. And I had that happen in an accelerated fashion by working as a client with Dashdot, and then working in Dashdot and kind of chewing through the nitty gritty of how to do it all as well. But the point is, your current thinking won't get you where you want to go. And if you want to get there just by trial and error, it might take you 20 years to realize the secret formula. But if you employ a professional, they've already got that knowledge. They've bought 500 houses or whatever, so they've had 500 refinements of the technique and the methodology to help clients get where they want to go. So the realization for me would be that if I had my time again and I didn't know and I was at the same level of understanding I was then, and if I'd come across it, I would have used a buyer's agent similar to what we do now, because I didn't have the skills or the resources to buy out of area, and even if I wasn't within Dashdot now, I don't know if I'd have those as now, even as an individual, because the organisation has the ability to leverage lots of resources, lots of research houses and things like that the average individual doesn't get. Sorry, I've kind of just gone off in the weeds a bit there.
No, it's okay. It's good. I would have shut you up if we were going in the wrong direction, but I actually thought it was really, really insightful, because you're right. It's a bit of a hard one for people to get their heads around. I know. I get emails and stuff from property investors all the time, and I had one just a couple of days ago, and the email was basically said something along the lines of, "Hey, can you buy me an off-market property in one of these 3 suburbs?" Now, incidentally, there were 3 suburbs that we were buying in about 18 months ago, but we're no longer buying in. And I just thought it was a really strange request. I said, well, why specific, like for an investment property, why specifically those suburbs? Why specifically off market? And it was just interesting to understand just to look at the way that they were answering. And it just showed, there's a lot of blinkers, and they're blinkers that people don't know that they have. Like there's just a lot of people are really in the dark when it comes to how to actually get further ahead, how to break through that 2 property ceiling, how to get to that, like the prevailing look. Obviously, it's not about the number of properties, because you could have 10 properties at $100,000, and that probably wouldn't want to get you where you want to go, and vice versa. 1 property at $1 million is probably not going to serve your needs either, right? So it's not necessarily about the number of properties, but providing you're buying somewhere around, $400,000 or $500,000 properties, you're probably going to need, 3 to 5, probably around about 5 properties to really be able to set yourself up to live the lifestyle you want. And the really sad thing is that, as we just discussed, 90% of property investors never get past 2, which means that they never actually get to achieve the financial goals that they're after, and subsequently never get to that destination, the lifestyle that they want. So I think it's a really important conversation to have. So
yeah, and I think the fundamental issue, the issue with the average Joe, with me on the street making the leap to a buyer's agent, is we don't recognize it as a profession. The average public doesn't recognize it as a profession. So typically, I don't know, it's changing a bit now, but people don't go to the doctor and say, "Hey, I want you to prescribe me either this or this for this thing that I've got." You go and say to the doctor, "Hey, what do you think's best given my symptoms?" And it's the same, in my opinion, with a buyer's agent. Like, you're deferring to their knowledge, because not necessarily because they're certainly, in many cases, not smarter than you, or not more trained than you, or whatever, but they've got a specialization in an area that by default you're not going to learn by default how to invest in real estate. You might have a fluky win, or over time, if you do lots of research, you can get there. But same, if you want to go and work out how to fix a broken leg, you don't go and study medicine. You go and talk to a doctor, and they tell you how to do it, because they've done all the training. And I remember the thing that knocked me over when I came in and started working with Dashdot. I felt like I looked at all the tools that we had at hand, and I felt like this just isn't fair. So it's like, when I was thinking of me at that time working in Dashdot, competing against myself a year ago as an average buyer in the street trying to compete for the same property, and then Dashdot's got all these tools, research tools at its disposal. It's got lots of training and negotiation and property analysis and all this stuff, and you can just like, how could anyone compete with what we're doing, an average Joe on the street? The only way they could is if they dedicated themselves 50 hours a week to doing it and learning and trial and error.
Even then, like the cost of access to all of the information is just
totally
probably unattainable. So
yeah, like I say, and if I wasn't working at Dashdot next week, and I bought another investment property, I'd still probably come to Dashdot, because as an individual, you just can't dedicate the time that you need to dedicate, and you don't have access to all the tools and the research that we've got.
Yeah, totally. Well, look, I want to kind of step away. From Dashdot a little bit. I want to kind of dig into a few other things as well, because it seems to me that you've been on a bit of a journey, yourself, right? And I'm interested, in the fact that you were in the military, and then you went into engineering, and you've got to focus on lifestyle, and I'm very interested to know, like, what like, what are the biggest beliefs that have shaped your journey? Like, there must have been, because look, I'll just put it simply, you're not like the average Joe on the street. You know, I don't know many people who act and think in the way that you do, and have the commitment to their values and to their lifestyle and to their vision of who they want to be in the world, right? And that doesn't just happen, you know, for no reason, right? And so I'm interested to know what catalyst events you mentioned about your brother, you know, being in finance, and then you read that book. If you remember the name of the book, that'd be awesome too. But I'm interested to know, like, what belief systems have really shaped who you are today.
Yeah, the thing that comes to me, like, and it seems paradoxical as well, given the industry I work in, or I guess, is that I'm quite environmentally driven. I don't know if it is paradoxical, because then this, at the same time, a lot of our clients that come, they've got a very strong underlying environmental conscience and sustainability conscience.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's probably not a fair statement to say they're at you know, opposite ends. But the point is, I've always been driven by environmental responsibility, and before the couple of years before I started in that investment journey, I was like really strongly into reducing my personal footprint. So we didn't have a car. My family didn't have a car. We had our first child up until about 2. We just rode bicycles around. We went on a big cycle tour, my wife and I, just before our firstborn, for about 6 months, and refused to do plane travel, and like pretty at the relatively extreme end of environmental consciousness. And I was a bit of a ranter then as well. Like, I was kind of a bit like a convert and wanted to get everyone on board and that kind of thing. So that's really been my underlying drive, is to have minimal footprint on the world, and to foster a connection with, you know, with the earth, with the natural world for me in the day-to-day, and my family and my kids now. And that's kind of why we've landed where we've landed. And the investment side of it is really just a way of facilitating the day-to-day living of that value set. So the more I can buy back my time, the more I can immerse myself in those kind of, you know, activities that deepen that connection with nature, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So the investment is a means to live out those values on a much deeper and more connected level then.
It is, yeah. It's just a vehicle. It's exactly right. And it's funny, like, it feels like you say I'm not like the average, you know, real estate agent in inverted commas, but like
neither am I.
I know, and that's the beauty of the team and the organization that we work in. That I did I don't know what I call probably ancestral skills is probably a good thing. So I did and learned, you know, how to make fire by friction, and do tracking, and paint myself up with camo, and go like and live in the bush and build a shelter out of sticks and leaves and stuff like that. I kind of got down into that field a fair bit. And yeah, and that kind of ties in with the environmental side. I'd studied permaculture as like, not as a profession, but as an extracurricular. And I did do a bit of consulting in it as well, but same kind of thing. It's kind of seeming at one side, it looks like the opposite of what you'd put a standard real estate agent persona in, if you know what I mean. So what the takeaway for me from that is that, yeah, it's not about the properties. It's not about flashing around money or getting super rich. It's about real estate as the vehicle to get to the lifestyle that I want to live for me and for my kids and my family and for their kids. Yeah,
totally. So yeah. And go on.
I was just going to say, it's more than a one generation thing. Like, if my parents were able to have given me the opportunity that I think I'm going to be able to give my kids, then I think I would be a different person to what I am today. Do you think it'd be better or worse? Like, because there's, you know, I was reading an article recently, you know, about whatever wealthy people who are not going to hand down an inheritance. Well, they say they're not going to hand down an inheritance, but when they've got $100 million, they're only going to hand down, you know, maybe 1 to 10%, right? So still a chunk of cash, right? But I'm interested, like, obviously it's purely hypothetical because you're not in that situation, but let's say your grandparents had started a real estate investing legacy and had built up that, and
your life would probably potentially be very different right now. And I'm wondering if you think that might be better or worse, knowing who you are and where you're at.
Yeah, I don't think it's a get out of jail free card, certainly. Like, I think there's still, factors that are going to cause you to have self-growth. It's not going to all be roses. You're going to still have bump up against, self-limiting beliefs that you're going to have to push through, and you're going to have challenges and trauma in your life and everything. But I think I could give more to the world if I didn't have to have salary as a factor in the day-to-day work that I do for the world, So if I could just go and do, if income didn't feature in what I chose to do for my work, I think that would, I'd probably be in a totally different direction. I don't know what that'd be.
Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting that we've gone into this area because, like, fundamentally, I was kind of like you, growing up, I was a bit of when I was younger, I only ever wanted to either be the prime minister. I wanted to either be a lawyer because I love debating, or the prime minister. Like, that's it. Not just a politician, but the prime minister, because I wanted to change things. I wanted to change society. And then as I started growing up, I realized that no one likes politicians or lawyers. So that wasn't really that exciting. But then, I was teaching permaculture in Ethiopia, and I got into edible native plants. I would go bush just with a pocket knife and some basic stuff, and just go bush for the weekend, all that kind of stuff, and really wanted to give back. But it was all driven by a lot of I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, well, how can you completely change society? And I just got to a point where I couldn't see a pathway to do that without helping people to elevate their financial standing. Because if you can help people to escape from the paradigm that they're in, where they have to trade their time for money, and give them the capability to be able to do. And that being said, what some people do for money right now is the thing that they would do whether they were getting paid or not. And that's awesome. But I think that there's a lot of people who would maybe spend their time a little differently, and it might be spending time giving back, and it could be helping others, or it could be helping the environment, or it could be in some way shaping, or it could even just be, having the time and space to create, and to be able to create new masterpieces of music and art and experience, and create a more, abundant and enriched world. That's kind of my vision and desire. So, no, cool. I'm glad we ended up here. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that's changed for me in my life between like the pre-investment and post-investment was pre-investment. I was kind of like, why do you need money to do all that? I'll just go and do it now. Like, I'll just go and, take friends on bushwalks to connect them with nature, rather than going and working in a paid job, and just take people on bushwalks for free, or not focus on the income at the start. But then as I got older, I kind of realized that I'm not going to have this capability and physicality for my whole life, and the ability to live on the smell of an oily rag like I was when I was 20 or whatever. And so I've kind of been pushed by that realization to go, well, I do need to sort out my financial future, so that I can continue doing it in my older, because I don't want to be like 60 and living on the pension, and in that same, not that there's anything wrong with living on the pension, but that not being able to do the things that I want to do because I can't afford to fill the car, or go out doing the things I want to do, go out diving, or that's the other things I like doing. Yeah. So yeah, it's investing now for my future self, basically, the financial future self.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. Well, I've got a question for you, right? As we're probably moving towards the latter stages of our time together. And it's a big question, and it's going to probably challenge you a little bit. But imagine that it's your last day on Earth, many years from now. You're old, you're 80, 90, however, you've lived a full life. You've accomplished everything that you wanted. You've built your property portfolio. You've everything that you could all of your goals, dreams, aspirations, you have achieved all of it. But for some reason, on your last day, it's all going to disappear. You're not able to pass any of it down to your friends or your family. Now, everything's going to cease to exist the moment you cease to exist. Nothing will stay. Nothing you've written, nothing you've created, nothing you've accumulated, nothing. The only thing that you can leave on this earth is three truths, three simple truths. What three truths would you leave behind?
I don't know if I can think of three, but while you're saying that whole thing, I was thinking, I thought you were going to say, what would you do for that last thing? And I'd spend time with my kids. So
yeah,
I think the answer is spend time with loved ones. Is the one truth. And I don't know if I can spring to the other two. Let me have a think.
Another way to think about
the thing that keeps coming to me is kindness, like act with kindness. And that's something that changed in my journey as well. I did go through a stage of being a bit of a ranter and a convert to environmentalism. And what I've changed to now is kind of meeting people where they're at and you know, truly and actively engaging with people where they're at. And to me, that's kind of a tenet of kindness, not trying to impose my values or where I am on my journey to them. And so I think, you know, act with kindness would be another fundamental truth that I have.
Yep. And maybe one more. And the way to think about it would be maybe just like, if this was just one thing and just one thing that you could pass on to your kids, the only thing that you left behind for your family and for future generations, one final truth that you could encourage everyone to live by or to stand by.
Like it's probably comes back to what the kind of basis of what we've been discussing is to spend time with nature, I think.
Yeah. So spend time with family. Go on.
I think it makes you a better person. Well, for me, it makes me a better person. I can't speak for everyone. I don't impose that on other people. But my fundamental truth is it makes me a better person, makes me a more whole person, makes me, live a better life the more time that the deeper my connection with nature comes, and that comes from time with nature.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's good. So number one, spend time with family. Number two, act with kindness. And number three, spend time in nature.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty solid to me. I like that too. I like that too. I think that's good. Well, Nic, thanks, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's really good. We've covered a lot of good ground. Is there anything that you might want to add or anything you might want to share before we wrap it up? Or do you feel like we've gone in a lot of good directions? No,
it's been fun. It's really cool to, have someone actively listening to you and asking you questions. That's been really fun. Thanks, Goose. There's not anything in particular I want to add on to that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you and everything you're doing and all the value you bring to all of our clients and the care and consideration you show to all of our clients and also the rest of our team. So thanks for being a part of this journey and thanks for everything you do.